For those of you who saw the pictures of the videos and the imagery of the levaya of the funeral which took place in Bnei Brak just yesterday, perhaps you noticed that there were close to 750,000 people at one man's levaya, one man's funeral. And it begs the question to ask, a man lives his life in a little corner in Bnei Brak for 95 years, uninterrupted in everything that he did. And at the end of his life, when the world wants to honor him properly, almost 1 million people come to pay their last respects. What does a person have to do in this world to merit to have 750,000 people come to their levaya? And they travel from all over the country. And there were traffic jams, and it wasn't easy to get back. But every single person, the Mesiras Nefesh, with great sacrifice, made sure that they would be there. What is the secret of a person who leaves the world and has an impact on all of Klal Yisrael? Perhaps the answer is when Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky ztz, when his Rebbe, Rav Michal Yehuda Lefkowitz, was asked, why was your Talmud, why was your disciple Rav Chaim, why was he Zeicha, why did he merit such greatness in Torah? Why did he merit such lofty levels in this world? Recognized far and beyond from the little corner of the world of Bnei Brak that he sits in. What was the secret to his success? And Rav Michal Yehuda answered, one thing: Midos Tovos, Midot Tovot, the positive character traits that exemplified the man that Rav Chaim Kanievsky was. We'll hear stories about his greatness in Torah, how there was nothing in the world of Torah, nothing in the world of Chazal that wasn't on his fingertips all of the time. We'll hear how a man learned for 18 hours a day, and that's with interruptions. That's with people knocking on the door. That's with all the people that were on his shoulder all day long that he had to worry about to try to make people have happiness in this world. But Michal Yehuda said, when he saw the midos, when he saw the noble traits in his student, Rav Chaim Kanievsky, he said that was a siba, that was a cause of how he merited to be able to achieve all the levels of godless, of greatness that he had. Now we're talking about a man in his life who never wanted to waste a single minute. As a matter of fact, it was told over at the levaya, at the funeral, that when his father passed away, the stipler, so there was a shir that was given on Motzei Shabbos, on Saturday nights, in the Yerushalmi Gemara, not something that people learn on a regular basis. And the shir was in 4 pages of the Gemara on one Saturday night. So anyone who's learning Daf Yomi, imagine 4 Daf Yomis in one day. 4 Yevamos in one day, imagine. So Rav Chaim Kanievsky had a directive from his father. The directive was, your job is not to be a Rosh Yeshiva, your job is not to be a Rosh Kollel, your job is to sit and learn, you don't even have to give shiurim. But they convinced him for the year of his father's yortzeit, the year that his father passed away, it would be a kavod, it would be a great honor if he would give the shiur that his father, the stipler, gave on Motzei Shabbos Saturday nights. So for 1 year straight, every Saturday night, Rav Chaim Kanievsky would give over that shiur. At the end of the year, he said, I'm done. I'm not giving the shiur anymore. They said, please, Rabbi, give the shiur. He said, I don't have the time. So his son asked him, Tati, what do you mean you don't? He said, I don't have the time to give up from my own learning to prepare for this class. So his son asked him, how long does it take for you to prepare 4 pages of Yerushalmi? So he said, 5 minutes. But those 5 minutes, he didn't have to give away from learning. The same man who didn't have 5 minutes to give away once a week to prepare for a class that would be an elevation of his father's neshama is the same man who gave away 2 hours every single day in his house to all of Klal Yisrael. Every day in the early part of the afternoon and the later part of the afternoon, there were 2 hours that Rav Chaim's doors were opened up, and anyone that wanted to come into the door, if you could get inside the front door, you were able to come. You could ask for a bracha, you could ask for eitzah, for advice, you could ask for a halachic question, you could talk whatever you wanted. The doors open. You don't have 5 minutes to prepare a class, but you have 2 hours every day to give to Klal Yisrael. And he said himself, after his father died, he realized that we live in a generation, a tzibroch in a generation where people are broken. People are looking for chizuk, they're looking for strength, they're looking to be inspired. And if I could sit there and tell somebody a bracha, if I could sit there on Shabbos and smile and say, good Shabbos, if I could be the person that's going to make a little bit of more light in someone's life, then it's worthwhile for me to give up the time to make sure that Klal Yisrael is getting what it is that they need. Said Rav Michal Yehuda, what was the greatness of Rav Chaim? Yes, the learning was beyond what anybody could imagine. He was holding in everything all of the time. But the nekuda, the point of his greatness, which catapulted him to higher heights, besides the diligence and the never-ending, tireless way in which he learned and never missed out on a second that he was supposed to learn, was that he was a man that was filled with midas tayvais. And as we find in the Chumash, this I heard many years ago in the name of Rav Yaakov Rosenberg, the Rosh Hashiva of Mechon Shlomo. If you look in the Torah never ever speaks about how big a Talmid Chacham Avraham Avinu was. It never speaks about how many times Moshe Rabbeinu went through Shas. It doesn't tell you how many times Yitzchak Avinu learned Shulchan Aruch. It never says it. The only thing that the Torah speaks about is midot, is our character. And that's what Rav Chaim himself writes in his beautiful Sefer Orchos Yosher, when he's speaking about the world of midot, the world of midos, of character traits. He brings Rav Chaim Vital the following, and I'll end with this. He says like this, Sha'midos eina nimnin b'tarek mitzvahs. If you look at all 613 mitzvot that we have, you never see that it says that this particular midah is a mitzvah in and of itself. Because they themselves are the foundation and the main part of all of the mitzvos. And if you don't have good midos, it is impossible for a person to keep mitzvot. A person who doesn't have a good midah, who doesn't have kindness, who's not gentle, who's not a Baal Chesed, who doesn't have Rachamim, how can they learn Torah? The ways of Torah are peacefulness and pleasantness. If you have good midos, good character traits, then Torah is something that you can imbibe. I'm too small to spend any more time talking about the Anak, the giant that Rav Chaim Kanievsky was. But we are privileged that we have with us tonight the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, as we are sitting thousands of miles away, feeling so far from all of the events of Eretz Yisrael. If you saw the pictures, I remember myself 26 years ago, I was by the Levaya of Rav Shlomo Zalman Arbach, who at that time, he was one of the Gedolei Ador. There was 300,000 people by that funeral, and that was something outstanding to be a part of. Here you have almost 1 million. And we have tonight with us Rabbi HaRav Elchonon Hershowitz, who goes back many, many decades with Rav Chaim Kanievsky, with a personal, close relationship that he was able to share. And he was gracious enough to give us of his time and of his wisdom and his insight to share with us, to bring us into a different world than we are used to seeing. A world of a Gadol Hador, of a leader of the generation. A world of a person whose life was Torah, whose life was mitzvahs, whose life was midos. A person who lived for the Ribbono Shel Olam, and he gave his life for Klal Yisrael. Without any further ado, it's really an honor and a kavod and a pleasure to ask Rabbi Hershowitz to be maspid to eulogize Rav Chaim Kanievsky.
As was mentioned, the Almighty, Ribbono Shel Olam, has His plans that I should be here in this most difficult time as far as the loss of Klal Yisrael, which are normally under the normal circumstances. I've been now in Bnei Brak, running from one Hesped to the next, listening to all the Talmidim of Rav Chaim, all those that used to come in and learn with him. And even though modern technology today, everything is online, as they say, but the Almighty obviously has a plan for me that I should be in this particular place, with this particular olam, this wonderful community, looking at each and every one. I could see the tremendous desire to hear the words of, one would say, the hashpoeh, the influence of listening, what it means to be a tzaddik, what it means to be a person in the level of Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky, Zichrono Tzaddik Livrocha. The Gemara's mention when Rav realized that his days are coming to an end, he realized his Talmidim are going to make, I want to say 750,000 people, but it's going to be a Levaya. Rav, one of the greatest Amoraim that we ever had. And he asked one of his Talmidim, one of his disciples, Reb Shmuel Bar Shilas, Achim li be'espedoi, I want you to say the Hesped in a way that the listener should be affected by the words that you're going to say. Tahosam kain, I'm going to be there listening. Meaning what he's trying to tell him is, I want you to say the words that I would want you to say. And with those words that I want you to say, I want you to say in a way that should have the effect on the listeners and to understand what it means to lose a great Rebbe. Who is this Reb Shmuel Bar Shilas that he nominated? In the Gemara is mentioned that Reb Shmuel Bar Shilas was known and famous being a melamed daldik, a teacher for young kids. A teacher for young kids, as we know, the same Bereshis Bora Elokim that it says in the Torah that we teach young kids when they start learning Chumash, it's the same Bereshis Bora Elokim that the whole Shas is full of all kinds of explanations and depth and in Kabbalah and everything. The Melamed Daldik, the teacher, the first teacher of these children, his job is to teach him the simplicity of the words, the simple explanation of Bereshis Bora Elokim. Rav wanted somebody to give a hesped, to be ma'orer, to have the effect on the audience not with holy words, not with high-level words, but plain, simple words. I would say plain, simple, obvious stories, obvious situations that we've seen by the big tzaddik Reb Chaim. And with these stories, with these explanations, and with these, I would say, events that were happening all the time, we have to have this privilege, I should say, the merit, to be ma'ira the olam of understanding what means koyach HaTorah. Now, I must apologize. I don't know if my expressing the words the way they are expressed, the way I understand it myself, it will be given over to the proper way it's supposed to be given over. But I do expect the listeners to understand that every message has a powerful message, and I'm not expecting anybody to turn into a big tzaddik because of today's evening. But as we were taught by our teachers, a few minutes, even a few minutes of a thought of a Jew that he wants to be better, to be closer to the Almighty, a Jew that he sits around even for 5 minutes and he feels that his level of spirits is a bit higher than it was 5 minutes ago, that's a tremendous accomplishment. The Gemara says, Chacham shemeis hakol kroivov. When a Talmud Chacham dies, leaves this world, everybody, hakol kroivov, everybody is considered the relatives to a point, just like we should never know from Tsar, when a child loses a parent, he has to tear kriya, a brother, a sister, a mother. When a chacham shemeis hakol kroivov, Chazal teach us halacha that we have to tear kriya. I don't know what the minhag was today at the Levaya. I know in previous times there were hundreds and thousands of people who were going around tearing kriya on the tzaddik, on the Godel Ador. What makes us hakol kroivov? What makes Klal Yisrael? When I say Klal Yisrael, I'm talking about people even thousands and thousands away from there, thousands and thousands away from Bnei Brak, not just in a matter of miles and distance, but even as far as the atmosphere and the style of life. Hakol kroivov means that any Jew that's considered a Jew, a Ben Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, children of the Almighty, are craving to this Talmud Chacham shemeis. The reason is because we know very well, we're thinking about the last few years that we went through, the terrible years with the COVID-19 and the disasters of one after the other, in Miami in one place, in Miran in another place, and all kinds of stories. We know for some reason the Almighty was sending us all kinds of messages, and obviously we had to do something to respond to the Almighty's messages. We had people like Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky ztz, that he would shield us. He used to talk about trachten, thinking, what does the Almighty want? Obviously, we don't have a Dovid today, we don't have a prophet to tell us exactly, but definitely the idea is what he was telling us all the time, tracht, think, the Almighty is talking to us. We always had this feeling that Chaim's messages were messages that it wasn't possible not just to ignore it. Hakol kroivov, who we have today. Wars are going on all over the world. Everybody knows what's going on today in the world. Chazal says, Shvi'is milchomos. The year of Shemitah, there's milchomos in the world. Who's going to help us now to overcome this difficult period? Hakol kroivov. We don't find anywhere in Chazal that says that b'chaim that hakol kroivov. as when the Talmud Chacham and the Tzaddik is alive, everybody is his relatives. It's true. I don't know from this crowd how many were those that stood in line to get a bracha from Rabbi Chaim. It's true that every day, 3 times a day, people would stand in line to try to get in. Some did manage to get in, some didn't manage to get in. But it wasn't Hakol Kroivov, not the whole world was Kroivov. Because we did not have the feeling that we're together with him. Little did we know, little did we realize that not being together with him, but he was the one that was keeping us going. He was the one that kept us going, not just because he said words of wisdom, or because he said words of encouragement. He kept us going because his Chus HaTorah, Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky's Torah from morning to night. I remember at the time when his wife was alive, she had the power to get Rabbi Chaim to take a walk for 7 minutes in the morning. While he was walking, he was still thinking and learning. When she passed away, he decided that it's not mechuyev anymore, and those 7 minutes he kept for himself. He planned another plan of his daily kviyas, his daily what he is to do. Reb Chaim's Torah is something that definitely is kept us going, and even though he himself is not here, but his Torah is in every Bismedish coming here. Also I found on the table a sefer from Reb Chaim on Shemitah. There's no question that the Hakol Kreva V'Lacha Mise, we definitely have to have this feeling that he is the one that's going to help us, even though he's not here now. I remind myself now, going back 30 years ago, when the missiles were flying all over Israel. I don't know how many of you remember that period, how many casualties were miraculously very little, but there were bombs and falling all over the place. And Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky ztz kept us calm with the feeling that B'nai Brak, nothing is going to happen. I remember on the radio they used to have what they call a Margia Le'umi. Those of you understand if you know what it means. An official person whose job was to calm the population from all the missiles, that as much as missiles is falling, but he used to have all kinds of tricks of calming people. Yadut HaCharedit, they used to say, has also Margia Le'umi, has somebody kept us calm. Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky always, the whole time, kept us saying, B'nai Brak, nothing is going to happen. There was a bomb that fell on the street of Rehov Yonah, and we felt it Friday night. It was really something that was as though it was around the corner, you can imagine. And the first question we all asked at the time, Shabbos morning, we got up to the shul, was Reb Chaim going to say, now it fell in B'nai Brak? They found out the Rehov Yonah is on the border, it belonged to Ramat Gan. It did not fall in B'nai Brak. Reb Chaim Kanievsky did not know terrorist attacks. There was once a terrorist attack on Kvish Petach Tikva. Also, there was a whole debate if that where the bus was at the time. Hakol Kroiva, we all have to have this feeling. We have this feeling that we're missing, and who knows what's going to happen now. Reb Chaim's Hasmoda was just, I'll never forget, when we were younger boys, we had the time. We just go watch him in Koil Chazanish, watch him learning. And later years when I used to go up to his room upstairs, he used to receive everybody downstairs in the living room, but those who got a bit closer to him, so we used to go upstairs to follow him, to talk to him, whatever we had to talk to. So he had a half hour a day that he would respond to letters. People sent him letters. And if you ever noticed, the Chaim's responding to the answers with one or two words. One or two words. And the son would sit at the one side of the table, and Chaim at the other side of the table, and the son would pass on the letter to him. And while he was reading the letter, I would talk to him, I would have to talk to him. He wrote the word, the other one. Every second of his life was Torah, and he had nothing to do with it, nothing else but other than Torah. Everybody most probably remembers the time when Reb Chaim's nusach of a bracha used to be bracha v'atzlocha. Every person would come into him, whatever it was bracha v'atzlocha. At one stage of life he changed it to bua, and everybody seemed to feel it was funny to give bua instead of bracha v'atzlocha. If you make the calculation why he changed it, many years ago people also used to come to Reb Chaim, but it wasn't hundreds in a time. In recent years, 3 times a day, after Shachris, after Mincha, after Ma'ariv, people, and you know the steps going up to his apartment, people used to stand there hoping to get inside. And everyone who did get inside managed to present Reb Chaim his question, his request. Reb Chaim made a calculation. From bracha v'atzlocha to bua, he saves 3 minutes a day, and it was so instant on that somebody who's once zeicher to the word hatzlocha, they saw that a tremendous merit. And I must tell you the story why that person was zeicher to it. It's also a tremendous story. I'll even tell you the name. If I remember the name correctly, the fellow's name was Eliezer Winder. I think today he's a photographer in Borough Park in Brooklyn. He was a kid learning in yeshiva, and an American kid at those days go around with a camera wasn't so common. In those days the cameras had a film that you had to, not today where we just take out. And he went to near Lederman Shul, near to Reb Chaim's house, and he saw Reb Chaim downstairs, for some reason, near a cat. Well, I don't know what the cat comes into the story, but he took a picture with Reb Chaim and a cat. And Reb Chaim brushed him away. But being an American kid the way he was, he just kept taking another picture, until Reb Chaim turned around to him and rebuked him very strongly. For some reason he had a feeling that Reb Chaim is going to run after him. And he had a feeling that Reb Chaim has a tremendous kpeda on him. So in front of Reb Chaim he opened his camera, took out the film and threw it away. 25 years later, this Eliezer Winder came to Eretz Yisrael with his boys bar mitzvah to go to the Koisel and to go to get brachas and gedolim. Standing in line, waiting to get into the room, as they come past the door, Reb Chaim looks at him and he says to him, Ich warte auf dir schon 25 Jahre. I'm waiting for you 25 years. He did not introduce himself at all. Reb Chaim just looked at him. And this fellow, this Eliezer Winder, is thinking to himself, he's coming to Reb Chaim to ask Mechila that what he did. And here he hears such words from Reb Chaim, that Reb Chaim, I'm waiting for you 25 years to ask you Mechila what I've done to you. To show him that he's no paid on him, he agreed to take a picture with the bar mitzvah boy, and he got the bracha v'atzlocha. This is what the Rav actually said. That's the midas tevis of Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim feeling of hakoras to be ask mechila. Now I'm asking you a very simple question. Do you really think that Chaim 25 years was thinking about that case? I'm sure that when it happened, until that time, he had no idea. He forgot about it. But the Almighty gave him such a siyata d'shmaya. At the time he felt he was mechuyev to ask mechila. Koyach HaTorah of Rab Chaim with the Rebbeinu Shalom was so strong that the Rebbeinu Shalom, the Almighty, gave him this power. Now he's going to remember it. And remind yourself, this was an 18-year-old boy. This is a father with a bar mitzvah boy. No comparison whatsoever. Let's say it even didn't have a beard, but to remember that this person was this 25-year-old boy, the 18-year-old boy, that's only the Torah, the Koyach HaTorah from the Chaim, that the Chaim had. To go and try to explain Reb Chaim's cheshbonis, to try to explain Reb Chaim's behavior. Why would this person and that person? I've seen it that many times, that he would read the letters, every word, and answer right away. Some he would think. Some he would look up at the person. Some he wouldn't look up at the person. I don't know what his cheshbonis were. But then I do know that anybody that there felt it. If Reb Chaim looked up at him, we felt that he looked up on him. If he did not look up on him, that means he did not look up on him. If he read the letter twice, we felt it, that Reb Chaim was reading it twice. In other words, every single item that Reb Chaim would do, we had tremendous feeling towards him. Even though, I say again, Baruch Hashem, I should be zeicher to remember all the stories that I had myself with him. I had a lot to go in for, not always the best of things, a lot of eitzes and chinuch and all that, and I had to manage. The Chaim had a downstairs and an upstairs. Downstairs you would accept everybody for a minute or two, but upstairs in those days was considered the place where you could talk to him at length. I'll never forget, I brought him this American boy with the father who was from some town in Indiana, and the boy wanted to go learn in the Jewish high school, and the father wanted him to go to someplace else. And I took him to Reb Chaim. So Reb Chaim looks at me, doesn't look at them, he says, "Bring him in Bnei Brak. Bring him to Bnei Brak." That was Reb Chaim's attitude. Bnei Brak is what the solution for everything. Chaim's Musagim in Gashmius. Personally, every time I went on my trips from fundraising, I used to go in to ask Chaim for a brocha. In those days, it still was the brocha v'atzlocha. So I once asked him, what does it mean to have atzlocha in fundraising? So I thought he'll tell me $10,000, $20,000. Also, es kennen sitzen lernen, that you should come back and sit down and learn. That's Hatzlacha. And that was so I thought it happened once, he said it, but every time the same thing. And I got news for you, he didn't remember me. He didn't remember anybody. There was only one person that I remember from his family that he had a special relationship with him, but he definitely did not know the people that he was talking to. The only thing he did remember, that when somebody brought in a kvittel, it was a choyle, and he asked it to be mispal, and the Chaim realized it's nothing to daven for, so this fellow thought he'll be smart and come again 2 days later, and he brought the same piece of paper and the same name, and the Chaim said, Hashem gevem by me, I was here, he was here already. In other words, the Chaim realized that whatever has to be done is being done in the right way. I remind myself now of another story which also explains a bit of what actually Reb Chaim's message to Klal Yisrael was. I don't know if you know, we have in Bnei Brak a hospital called Ma'anei Yeshua, that Reb Chaim was very much involved in the foundation of the hospital, and it's run in the proper Jewish religious halachas ways. And Reb Chaim happened to be in the hospital to visit one of his children at the time. And there's an elevator that goes down with the public, and there's a back elevator for the personnel. Of course, Chaim, when he had to go down the elevator, they took him into that particular elevator. And that elevator, when going out of the elevator, going out of the hospital, goes through the corridor where the husbands are sitting and waiting for the wives to give birth. Cheder Amtana, it's called. They heard that the Chaim is coming down, they all ran out. That's the time when you want a bracha. And they all ran out. I remember what happened. One after the other. To one of them he said, bracha. To one of them he said, Mazel Tov, it's born already. To one of them he kept quiet. And each and every one of them, the way Chaim reacted, that's what happened. To those that he said Mazel Tov, that means they gave birth already, even though the husbands did not know about it. What was the talk of town at the time? Reb Chaim does not have Ruach HaKodesh. Reb Chaim definitely did not live a life of Ruach HaKodesh, of a Novi, of a prophet. What Reb Chaim did have was, he had special siyata d'shmaya, being a person that wanted to know only Torah was his interest. The Rabbeinu Shalom, the Almighty, gave him this koyach to know things that we don't know. When I say only knowing what Torah means, I don't know if you know Bnei Brak, there's a street called Chov Rashban, that's where Reb Chaim lived, and parallel to that is Chov Nehemiah. And somebody was trying to mention to him Chov Nehemiah, didn't know what he's talking about. So he asked him, Rebbe, that also you're not allowed to know. You're not allowed to know, and talking about the Chaim, and that was the street that I used to walk every morning, that street. So he showed him Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi state that every idea noisefes, any additional knowledge that a person has in his head, takes away from the place, and that place would be another idea of a Torah. And that's the way he lived. He lived, nothing else in the life interested him. What he wanted to know was Torah and only Torah. But on the other hand, as was mentioned before, when it came to the Yechidim, when it came to the people who needed him, when it came to those, I would say, I don't like to use the word achmonas on them, but people who needed him in the sense of that he realized that his bracha is going to do a lot to them, he had all the time for them. He had all the words for them. He didn't have conversations, that's for sure, but as I said before, if he picked up his eyes or he just looked and sat, all this was a part of his behavior to Klal Yisrael and to his Avos Yisrael. There's no question that all we're talking tonight is words that makes the greatness of Reb Chaim. But what does it have to do with us? What does it have to do with us as an individual? None of us could say, I hope to one day that me and my children should be like Reb Chaim Kanievsky. But what it does have to do with us, the message that Reb Chaim is trying to give us all the time. Torah is the Ikar HaChaim. This morning, I asked my grandson, 6-year-old boy, how do you explain the word Torah's Chaim? He says to me, Torah shemiviyah Chaim. He said to me in Hebrew, Torah that brings life. So I said to him, my father, I was a bit older than him at the time, explained to me that Torah's Chaim is not Torah that brings life, but Torah's Chaim means Torah's life of Torah. There's a life that's life of Torah, and there's a life without Torah. Life of Torah means that every single item that goes on during the day is guided by the Torah. Now, not all of us are zeicha for that, that's for sure. We have to really work years for that. But as I said before, at least a few moments that we're sitting here together, to have this feeling, I wish I'd be able to do some act during the day, that this act is coming from my kesher with the Torah Kedusha. Not because I want to do it, not because I have to do it, but the Torah, at this 5 minutes I'm thinking, as we're talking now, I hope I could be able to do such a thing, such an activity, such a way my children should be able to see what it means Torah's Chaim in the sense of a life of Torah. I do hope, and I do pray, I should say, that our words that we spoke tonight did have some effect to a point of, as I say now, at least to think. Every person has to grow. We mentioned Shabbos, somebody we're talking to. There's no stopping and growing. There's no such thing, I've accomplished what I want to accomplish, now it's time to retire. In spiritual life as a Jew, we are Jewish, we are the Almighty's children, we are the Almighty's Chavivim Yisrael. The Almighty is looking for those few moments. The Rebbe Shlem was looking for those few moments that a person should feel, Avinu Shebashamayim, I want you, I want to feel you. And the Almighty is there, there's no question in my mind that the Almighty is waiting to listen to us and is going to give it to us. Be'ezer Hashem Yisborach. You should all have nachas from your children, from grandchildren. You should be successful in all your endeavors. And remember that the Almighty sent me here maybe for that message. And I hope I've accomplished it. At least a few minutes, if not more. Those can allow themselves more than a few minutes. A person has to grow in a point where the Almighty is satisfied with what I'm doing, Be'ezer Hashem.